Hi, hello everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome back to another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. If you were tuning in, I know we had a bit of a schedule change. So as a reminder, the guest that was going to be on today is going to be on Friday. You did not miss it. You can still spend some time and tune in. Should be an interesting conversation in terms of kind of future investing, a lot of interesting kind of space related names and stocks that
Which
we'll walk
guest?
through. Purdy, he's an analyst at Clear Street.
Oh,
Should be
nice.
really interesting. Yeah, so I think there's even going to be discussions on kind of stocks that rotate around investing on returning to the moon. So kind
All
of
right.
some interesting
Look at you.
future tech that should be really interesting. So yeah, just a good reminder, you haven't missed it, but we are going to spend some time kind of talking through kind of where things are in 2026, pull out some interesting themes, of course, as always. We've got Noah on, which would be great as always. And yeah, just a good reminder if you're out there and joining us, we always appreciate it. And two, if you have any questions, comments, you're always welcome to put them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go along. I see Stevie in there. Happy Wednesday as well.
Stevie, how about those Texans?
Go Texans. We were talking about this yesterday. It's such a, I don't know, the naming of that team is such a crazy, it's just like the Texan, yeah, Texas Texans seems right. I don't know. It's such a,
If you want to embrace the whole state, though, remember, I guess they're formerly the Houston Oilers, right?
yeah, that makes more sense.
Is that right? Or they
Yeah.
no? Wait, maybe the Oilers went to Tennessee, and then the Texans were a new team. Maybe
I think. I mean,
NFL history wrong.
Confusing when they all get traded around. I think I was talking about this with somebody, and I think
Stevie
they
will
were
know the answer to this. If they are the Tennessee, no, yeah. I think the Oilers went to Tennessee, and then Texans were just a brand new team. But don't hold me to that.
Someone who's out there, let us know. Stevie, if you know specifically, I know you're in Texas. Let us know. But yeah, I think it's crazy when all the teams get shuffled around and keep their old names or change. I don't know.
Either way, I think they're the ones that knocked Aaron Rodgers into retirement, right? Beat the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I guess that's right. I guess he's
in
the
from
news.
Your home state.
Yeah,
not your favorite NFL team, right? It's the other.
It's the other side, the eastern side, I guess technically. Although I don't know if I can call myself still a true fan if I'm sort of half watching all the time. I guess ultimately no, right?
True.
Stevie's got the history. Let's see.
Yeah, so they're the Oilers. They went to Tennessee, and then I think Texans are just a new team.
Okay,
I don't think they moved from anyone else that I know of.
Yeah, I mean, feels like it's exactly.
And if you're going to do that, you want to embrace the whole state, right? So it's a good name if you're looking for that inclusiveness, which I know you always are.
I am. I was going to say, what would you rename it instead? You could do the Texas.
I would call myself the Cowboys, and then people would always be like, "Hey, we're going to the Cowboys game," and then they would actually show up. Just kidding. I don't know what I would call Texans is a good one, though it's obviously very Texas. So if I were looking for a non-geography specific name, I don't know what I would call myself.
Texas. I feel like they've got it. Stars, I guess.
Oh, an expansion team. All right, thanks, Stevie.
Okay, good history.
Stars is a good name for the hockey team. Yeah,
the team. Yeah.
Even Mavericks for the basketball team in Dallas is a good name. Even Houston's NBA, the Rockets, with a little NASA nod there.
I'm surprised. Why aren't they able to name themselves in the same way that stadiums are in terms of just saying, I want to be the
corporate
Texan Amazon, or I feel like, I guess if you lose, you don't want to be like Amazon lost or something. Maybe that's it.
Sucks.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And it's a good question. I mean, the teams always trick up the jerseys, right, for jersey sale. But one way to do it would be just to change your mascot every 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, introduce a new one. I feel like Pennsylvania has definitely been in on that game lately. I know they had Gritty.
What if companies did it? AdvisorShares was the name of the company, but it needed to have a mascot name.
That's very internationally minded.
Amazon.com bookies, right? But not gambling because, books, but.
Can't do that. Oh, yes, I see. That's very true. Yeah. I feel like Japan does that, right? With all their mascots for different specific things. I think,
For companies?
For services, I think maybe for companies, but definitely for services and kind of random, like the train will have a mascot. It's a
really
version of the train. Yeah. I think it's a good way to have people in the same way people care about sports, care about the community that they're in and the services. And
they take trains very seriously in Japan, I hear, right?
They bullet trains, very intense.
Well, just the time, and I think it's a big deal when the trains aren't on time there. I thought I read that somewhere.
Maybe, but yes. Fair enough.
They're known for their punctuality.
They are, for sure. Yes, a fast-running culture and hard work. I think they're, interesting, I think, over there. Is that on your list of places to check out?
I would at some point. It's not high on my list. I think the harder it feels for me to navigate, I don't know, a city or whatever. I don't know. And I don't maybe know enough about the old history of Japan, whereas I definitely want to get on my list something like Egypt and pyramids and things like that. I was just in Paris, and so we did a couple of tours, and that's a really, really, I guess, somewhat really old city. And I'm sure anyone who's a Japan history expert is like, you don't understand their history, which I don't. So yeah, I want to probably visit places to get a better understanding of their historic significance.
That's fair. I do feel like Japan has a lot to offer in terms of the history, in terms of the food, the culture, all of that. I think in terms of the cannabis, I think that's got to be one of the lower ranked countries. I feel like that's going to be one of the countries that is last to turn around in terms of embracing cannabis. Yeah. But I do think they have an aging population. So maybe there is some room potentially eventually for more of the medical side to come in. We'll see. But I know we're seeing some expansion globally, but I don't think that that's going to reach Japan for a long time. I'll have to see.
That is a good transition to talk about international markets, which I had a whole list of things I thought I wanted to cover. But, we've got an international ETF, which name and ticker I won't mention yet because I don't think we violated the name and ticker code. So maybe we don't have to pull this show. But it just got me thinking about international markets. They had a great year last year. I guess maybe depending on the category, but broadly speaking, outperformed the U.S. markets. At least internally, didn't see maybe a lot of flows as a result from it. I'd have to look more broadly in the marketplace to see how much it was drawing in flows. But I think, U.S. Dominated strategies still dominate the flows. What's your thoughts there in terms of what maybe drove a good year for the international markets last year? And do you think that's going to continue?
Well, so I would push back, I think, on the attention and flows in the U.S. I think in the U.S. versus kind of international names. I think I had read, and I'm trying to pull it up now, but I think they hit a new record in terms of international ETFs hitting an inflow record last year.
Interesting.
So I think there is attention. I mean, because I think for so long, international has been out of favor. The U.S. has really been the end all be all in terms of places to be. A lot of investors kind of had felt that way over the past, handful of years. I think in 2025 and a little bit before that, I think there was sort of an expanded interest into having a little more diversification, trying to find the right spots to be. I think that has always been the difficult part of international investing. There are opportunities out there. There are gems out there, but there's a lot to kind of sort through and to know if you're in the right kind of regions, but also if you're in the right stocks and companies and all of that, I think can be very difficult when you have that extra layer of things are in a different language. You don't really understand the markets as well if it's kind of separate from where you are. But yeah, no, I think there's been increased intention in terms of international investing, having a little more diversification when it comes to where you're invested. Like you mentioned, international, I think performance-wise did do very well last year. We have not called out specific ETF names, but I think our own has also done well, which is great. I do think when we talk about that, I think the thing that is most helpful when you are looking at a way of approaching the international markets where you are maybe using a more relative strength-based approach and being really choosy and selective in terms of not getting everything and really being selective of where you are can make a difference. So yeah, I think in terms of trend, does that continue in 2026? I can't, predict entirely, but I would imagine just sort of the landscape seems similar in terms of where we were in 2025, headed into 2026 with the opportunities there. I do think if we continue to see a weak dollar, I imagine that is obviously normally historically good for, looking internationally. And then on top of that, I do think sort of more current event wise, kind of even everything that's going on with Powell versus Trump and sort of the power struggle there. I do think that probably is not a super vote of confidence. Again, it's not like everything's collapsing. It's all over in doomerism. But I would imagine that might make it more attractive to look at other places as well, just to see.
What is doomerism?
You don't know doomerism? Doomerism is, do you know black pill?
No. Is that a show?
No. That was a Blackfish, I guess, was a show. But, like the Matrix, red pill, blue
Oh, I
pill,
know
all
blue
that stuff.
red pill. Yeah.
Yeah, black pill is, I think, basically becoming hyper cynical, nothing ever goes well, sort of
Oh,
just
darn.
resigning to.
No wonder I don't know what it means.
That's good. It is a good thing that you don't know what it means. But yeah, I think that is, some people succumb to that. But,
all right, here's the harder question.
yes.
Which is international markets from a performance perspective have not been very good for quite a while.
That's true.
And certainly not very good compared to the US. It doesn't mean it's been negative. So what changed for them, right? What changed for them? And, does that continue for international markets in 2026, right? Not to encourage people to time markets, but you want to make, adjustments in your portfolio and think about where you're weighting things. So what would you say drove international broadly performance? And, do you see that continuing?
Broadly drove it. I would say, I do think the weak dollar was a part of play there. I feel like China, there are certain areas that I think had specific drivers. I think last year, China definitely had sort of more of a, what would you call that? Economy stimulating move by the government that I think probably pushed things ahead in a strong way. I think in terms of, I can't tell if it's ultimately relative to the US, if the US has become just slightly less attractive, which I don't think is practically true. I just think that these other companies and maybe the larger companies that span more markets than just the US have been able to do well. So it's not a very succinct answer.
But it's, why, right? So weak dollar, you're saying drove stronger international market opportunities, right? And I was just pulling up one of the dollar-based ETFs, and it looks like, column down 7% over the year, though that's from 1 year. Actually, that could be also a bit of a misnomer because they're down about the same year to date, almost as if all the downturn over the last year has happened at the beginning of this year. But so you're saying weaker dollar, and then tell me what else you're saying that you think drove good opportunities here?
I'm trying to find something that is positive that has driven stuff abroad versus just sort of the chaos somewhat in certain parts of the US. But I think China, they had that stimulus sort of effect, I think mid 2025, which for a specific region that would have driven things positive. I'm trying to think of specific regions or specific names that really stand out as drivers last year.
And it's interesting because last year was a big tariffs year, right? You would expect that, well, I got to really rethink that thought. You might think that demand for international products would be weaker based on higher costs. If the demand wasn't weaker and those companies are selling at a net sort of, let's call it higher price, because now they're leveling in this tax. And so instead of selling something for $1 2 years ago, they're selling it for $1.10 to incorporate the tax, higher revenues. Doesn't mean they have higher profits or profit margins, but higher revenues. But that didn't seem to hurt international markets either.
I don't think so. I think part of it, I don't know how much that is impacted in 2025, but I know with the anticipation of tariffs, there was probably a little bit of front loading some of those orders. That could have been a short-term boost, but I really don't think that would have been the driving factor for 2025. Yeah. What else I think really drove things?
The only other thing that really comes to mind for me is I think it took international markets a much longer time to really recover from COVID. Obviously it depends on the market that you're talking about. And, we are certainly well past the drama of it. But I've always been pretty surprised at, between what happened to the market sort of at the height of closing everything down, it's a very quick bounce back and then only a rise from there, right? Mm-hmm. It feels, not normal, right? There's a price to pay for that kind of loss of productivity and GDP and everything that, all of that impacted. And to have never paid that price. Now, some of it, you can look at our deficit and Fed balance sheet and things like that, that helped drive liquidity in the markets. And we continue in this country to spend like drunken sailors, 39 trillion, right? In debt, something like that. And so, maybe some of those things were, part of the catalyst for it. But then I guess the question is, if we don't have a weaker dollar this year, if tariffs continue, which aren't we on any day watch on the Supreme Court decision?
Yes, I think we not missed, but I think there was an opportunity for there to be a decision. They passed.
Kicked it to like this week though, right? Today, Thursday, Friday, something like that. I thought, but we'll have to grok that and see when it's happening. So it's interesting, right? If to the extent that it is driven by weaker dollars, to the extent that it's a little bit of what you described, front loading international goods, relative to the impending tariffs, and now probably as inventories, decline. And I think we've seen places like Walmart saying, we're going to probably start raising some prices here and there because they've run out, of supply as well. I've run out of supply, but just inventory levels. And again, front loading those things. It would make me think that maybe the international markets aren't sustainable, right? And I don't know that I know enough about or have looked closely enough to look at how's employment or unemployment going, right? It does seem like all these countries are in a bit of their own turmoil and chaos politically. Immigration is a topic in many of these countries. I don't know.
I think they're also contending with the same kind of forces we are here in terms of, AI optimization and things like that, how that has an effect. I would imagine. I also do, again, it's a small area of the market, but I know we've seen some shifts in terms of travel. I know there has been slightly a pull away from the US. So I do wonder if there's some element there, more specific to markets like Nevada, Vegas, and things like that.
I can't imagine it's enough to drive, though, stock prices internationally stronger. But maybe,
who knows? Again, not for all different, areas of the market for sure, but maybe in hospitality. But I think most hospitality related stocks are conglomerates normally based in the US anyway. So,
that makes sense. So I definitely I did see, as I was online with you guys, the show with Dan, which was great yesterday. But I think you guys talked product, right? So we pulled that show for compliance review.
We did. It will be back up for replay eventually.
Well, do you want to give, the 2-minute rundown for anyone that missed yesterday, sort of where do things sit federally? And I think you have an important update on stock trading at Schwab, right?
That is true. We can share that as well. Yeah, that was a question that had come up in yesterday's show with Dan. But for anyone who missed it, a good reminder, we do post the replays on social. So keep an eye out for that. You can always go to the event center as well to see previous replays if that's helpful. But just kind of getting a sense of where we are in 2026 when it comes to the cannabis theme. Of course, still a lot of focus on the US side when we really see the changes happen on a federal level. Of course, closing out 2025, we did see that promised and anticipated executive order come through finally from Trump, getting that signed for rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3.
What's next? What's next? What do the next steps look like?
Next steps, I think, are clear, but also there's still some uncertainty in terms of what happens next. People are, of course, waiting for Bondi to move forward and kind of finalize.
So that's the next big step, right? Sign or don't sign, right?
Yeah, that's the next big step.
And don't sign is a bad thing for investors in this space. And I don't think anyone, there's certainly plenty of people who probably think, it'll never happen. But in our ecosystem and where we sit, we believe it's happening, right? So, all right. So at some point it gets signed. Then
so I think there's a range of people who also think, I think most people think, I can't say, I guess for sure, but I think a lot of people think it will happen in terms of when. I think it's less likely we get the outcome that she says, no, I'm not going to sign this, versus we are still waiting for a signature. But yes.
Let's assume she signs at some point.
Yeah. So next steps, I think still ultimately waiting on what the, not backlash from that is, but if there is any sort of like lawsuit element to
definitely be a lawsuit
back on that. Okay, well,
There's no doubt in my mind.
1,000%. Okay.
Absolutely. And then the question is, so relative to next steps, she would sign, let's assume it's available for a public comment period. There's no immediate effectiveness. I'm not a lawyer, but they'll try to get an injunction or a stay to keep it from moving forward, right? The opposition will. No doubt they will file something like that. But, at least relative to what I've seen on some of the, Dale's report shows, I forget the name of the guy from the cannabis lobbying industry who is on their show frequently and provides those updates. He feels pretty good about the industry's ability, and the government, I guess, technically, because they're suing the government, but the industry will certainly help the government understand, what the arguments are to be made for there not to be an injunction or a stay. And the way he describes it, which he's obviously very pro-cannabis, seems like getting an injunction or a stay would be a long shot. Doesn't mean there's not a longer fight ahead, but it would be a significant long shot. But same thing, there's two choices there. They could get it, and if they do, that feels like it's the same as, in a sense, Pam not signing, right? It'll be in limbo for probably a long, long time. Or they don't get it, right? And then, if I understand, next steps look like?
If they don't get it, I think, wouldn't it just be effectively
march towards the end of the comment period and yeah, absolutely have it effective. And then any other next steps around that?
Well, so I feel like the question is also, because again, I know people don't exactly know what things will look like. I don't know if we do see any sort of tax reclaim from 2025. We'll see. But I think things go into effect for 2026. Ultimately, I think things start pretty immediately, right? In terms
once
of
it's effective, after its quiet period.
So I think see those things happen in terms of immediate effects. And then I think people obviously are anticipating hopefully getting banking, hopefully getting listing, really opening up the space and the investment theme, I think, to a wider group of people who have, I think, at least some percentage of are waiting on it.
Yeah, but I think that's the next important steps, right? Which is custody and banking guidance of some sort, right? So that can come in the form of legislation. I'm not holding my breath for politicians to get anything done in the form of safe banking, but it can also come in the form of a Bondi memo. It can come in the form of other regulatory, be it Treasury or whoever, OCC, which oversees the banking industry, regulatory guidance saying, hey, we're okay. It does seem like there's still a bit of a gray area in the guidance and in 280E on all things adult versus medical, right? Because Schedule 3 is technically only approving it for medical use. So there'll be some questions there, right, to see what that looks like. And I think relative to the next point you were making about, investors coming in, I'm definitely going to continue to caution people that no different than the executive order, these are still tiny, tiny stocks. And they're usually pushed around with not a lot of capital. And these are very, anticipated events that are coming, right? I think similar to the executive order, we all kind of felt like it was coming, right? And then even before it was announced, we were like, hey, it looks like this is going to happen. And so people who are trading on the other side of it, right, know that it's going to happen too, right? And when it doesn't take a lot of money to push these stocks around, it's an important thing to remember that if you're coming in trying to time the market, my advice is not to do it. Do what you want to do, right? But we have this weird environment, and I think I saw this on the Dale's show, so maybe I need to try to convince those guys to get back on there again, where they're like, oh, cannabis just hasn't been great. I'm like, what are you talking about, right? 6 months, right? Up that basket, up whatever, 70%-ish, plus or minus, depending on what basket you're looking at. Yes, I get it. If you jumped in and anticipating things were going to the moon after the executive order announcement and then you saw it tank, you're pissed. I get it. I can't manage people's timing of this product. But, in the last 6 months, in the anticipation of these next steps with no real reform left, and it's up 70%, that's pretty freaking good. Yes. So again, it doesn't speak to, anyone who lost money trading options very quickly. Sorry. Timing sucks. It's really hard. But it should get you thinking about how you're going to approach, these next news events, good or bad, right? So remember, these stocks will be pushed around until custody's fixed. And even when custody's fixed, everyone's not jumping in on day 1 or 2. And so they'll still be push aroundable, right? I'll make up my own words now too.
Sure.
Once we see advisor platform availability, once we see real, more meaningful institutional support in these stocks, they're still going to be small for a while, and they're still going to be pushed around quite a bit. But I think that's the thing from an investor perspective to be mindful of.
Yes, I think that's definitely important, sort of growing pains of these types of stocks to anticipate short-term moves, like always, difficult to anticipate and adjust for in exactly the right way. I do think there is also kind of what you're talking about. I think there are probably some people who legitimately had trouble in terms of timing things, but I do think for the most part, some of it is sort of like the human, what would you call that? Bias ultimately. I think of looking at the actual numbers versus having sort of a vibe and a feeling of things, wanting things to go faster than they're going. But I do think when you zoom out, it is making that progress. It reminds me of all the time. I think there are all those stats on, different cities, Baltimore City, New York City, and people feeling it's dangerous or afraid or whatever. But I think looking at the stats in terms of where the trends are going, things have gotten much, much, much better. But yes, ultimately in terms of performance, that's important. And yeah, hopefully.
I'm even seeing Stevie's comment there. Looks like he got killed on a trade there, which sucks. I'm sorry to hear about that, Stevie. But I get it, right? Like, it's whenever you go into something thinking, holy cow, I've got this amazing sure trade, right? I'm going to buy into it. I'm going to buy some options. I know the executive order's coming and it looks like it's coming on that day. And then it doesn't work, right? As soon as you think I've got this amazing shorter term opportunity or news driven opportunity, that's the first sign you got to think about it and say, if I know this, everybody else likely knows this. If I'm a small fish, I'm a small fish in the ecosystem of trading these stocks and the size of the companies and the people who have the capital, to push these stocks around. You just want to be super careful. Just be careful is all I can stress.
Yes, that's true. I guess that is sort of the different in terms of a bet of if you think something was going to happen in 2025, that bet would have paid off over that longer time frame. But yeah, if you're betting on a specific day, that's hard. I also tried to put in a little bit of just to try a little bit on the 18th as well. Tough, but ultimately I've been in it for a longer time with more.
I did too. I looked into some options, but my approach with the options, not all of them. So I actually have, one order, one whatever, not contract, but some that are expiring this week. And I think, because I think they're the 5s. So yeah, they're not looking very good right now, though. Today's looking all right. All right, a little bit. And so, but then I bought a bunch of others, and I think you and I talked about this, and I even said I was buying some options, and what I had said was I was pushing them out into 2026 because if we didn't get it, and then they tanked a little bit, I would still have an opportunity for a headline or two to make an adjustment or recover some later. Mm-hmm. So I've got everything from I think March 2026 through 2027. Just sort of bought a bunch of different ones at different prices, and it just bought me some time. But again, small portion of my overall investment. I recognize that those can go to zero because the real problem is too, right? We may not even get the signature we're looking for. I don't think that's the case. And I think just like I posted last night, like I do believe it's coming. And I think my fingers are crossed, but I have it on no insight or information or anything, but I've been pretty consistent to say Q3, 4, and 5, but so Q3 wrong, Q4 wrong, we're in Q5. So we'll see. I could still be wrong. But again, until I have really hard evidence otherwise, I'm going to, approach it from a dollar cost averaging. I'm also going to, do some crazy stuff like options from time to time, but know what my risks are. But just know it's pretty much never a sure trade, and really be careful with the microcap stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think even just what we've seen in the first few trading days of 2026 feels like an encapsulation of kind of the past. It's been a little bit volatile coming in, but, just looking at 2026 so far, US side, up just under 5%. So not doing too shabby, I think. But
markets, this tariff thing could take a shot through the markets. I think Trump was out there saying the markets would tank. I think he's right.
I think a lot of the posts are tough of like, we're screwed if this thing doesn't happen. I don't know. It's crazy.
The crazy thing is I don't know that I don't know many laws, but I don't know what the rule is, right? Can a president drive tariffs? It seems like such a weird thing for Congress to tend to, right? You'd have an agency or a department or trade commission or something that might drive those things. It seems weird that it would be Congress. I could get to a point where it seems weird that it would be the president driving it, right? I'd want a balance, preferably, even though you can't really get it, nonpartisan, economic focused, growth focused team of people looking at that and making, those types of decisions. But I don't know what the rules are.
I think for 2026, similar to 2025 in some ways, I think there are still big unknowns in what could happen. I think, that's part of the diversification element if you're looking at stuff, part of potentially the hedging element if you're, getting worried about where things are going.
Yeah.
But I practically...
Did you give them the stock news though on Schwab? Did we cover that yet and I missed it?
No, sorry, that ties in. We'll maybe put out something that ties
in. You have like a noise that you can do, like a trumpet sound. You got a very important announcement.
How about this? I can do,
do it.
Let's see. Here we go.
I can't hear it. Do it.
That's not helpful.
That was like a record scratch.
All right. Breaking news, everyone. I need like a breaking news sound. Yes. So we'll talk about it. Kind of ties into the volatility that we were talking about earlier in cannabis stocks. So Marguerite had done some research to kind of get to the bottom of the question that we had gotten yesterday in terms of people seeing some of the names in cannabis. I think mainly U.S. or
they mentioned Village Farms, High Tide. I think one other. I think someone confirmed yesterday that it was fine on Fidelity to trade online, but people were being blocked to trade online on Schwab.
Yes, that is well set up. Thank you very much. But yes, ultimately, it seems like from calling some of the brokerages that...
Not just calling a brokerage, but someone actually tried to place a trade on Schwab.
Oh,
and then they were rejected. Let me help you. They were rejected, and it said you got to call in to place this trade. And so I asked them, hey, please call in and find out if you're going to be restricted or it's something else, and maybe ask them why. So they did just that. They called in, and you can place the trade when you call in. Good news, everyone, get excited. You're not restricted from buying these stocks on Schwab. You do have to call in, and apparently they, put an asterisk around them because of all the volatility that we've seen in these stocks. Funny little background story. Most things that people wouldn't notice. We run into an issue with Morningstar and data tracking the performance of our funds at a net asset value perspective because the volatility was so high. Apparently they have flags in their system to try to, identify a sort of what they would seem a clear, obvious error. And it's like, welcome to cannabis stocks. So there was gaps that they wouldn't hold the NAV. And so it affected, fact sheets and performance reports there. And we had to work with them to say, nope, this is real. And these are real numbers. And here's the backup, show them custodian data, and then get that updated in their system. So this is a crazy space. I think I said it to someone online. It's the craziest space I've invested in my whole life.
Really? Yeah. Volatile, as very, very volatile. I was going to steal Dan's, I feel like classic catchphrase for these stocks of volatile as hell, which they can be for sure. But yes, it is an important reminder. You can make those trades if you want by just calling in, ultimately, is the way to get it done. Because, I think it was across a few. I know Village Farms was the main one that had gotten...
Yeah, that was just surprising. But so it's good news. And that's... it's good that, again, Schwab just wants to make sure, their investors know what they're doing. And though odds are Schwab's just letting them trade the 3X micro strategy all they want. Go nuts.
Yeah.
But whatever. So did you guys talk states and or intoxicating hemp loophole extension yesterday?
We did not talk about that yesterday, but that is important. Kind of tying into the rescheduling and what we see there. I know there are a few states that are kind of hinging potentially on that rescheduling to make it really easy. Pennsylvania comes to mind most obviously. I think there have been a few states that are kind of, I think Rhode Island, that's kind of dealing on the medical side. But I think the main focus is, of course, Florida is a big one. And I think Virginia are some big, potential changes on the horizon. Ultimately,
I think same thing. I was hearing it on the Dales again from, I think, I need to go look up that guy's name. But like mid to late this year for Virginia, I'm not sure what about Pennsylvania. It just sounds like people are yelling at each other to try to get, stuff done there. So I don't know that there's any time frames that have been shot out around Pennsylvania, but those are two really important states relative to, stocks in a U.S. cannabis basket.
That is true. But I had seen, I think, Trulieve leading the charge again on Florida to put additional pressure for the operational side for Florida, which, again, a great medical market, I think, in general, and would be very interesting to see as a rec market for different multi-state operators have different levels of exposure to that footprint. So I think that would affect things differently, but probably reflective in some ways of allocation and how maybe Dan is even looking at names currently. So I think it's interesting. We'll see some knock-on effects. Again, we're still at that point where effectively half of states, including the district, have rec policy. Ultimately, the majority of Americans live in a state with some level of cannabis, access and use. I think that's a trend that's only going to continue to pick up. But yeah, those are the states that I think people are most focused on from a stock perspective, and also probably use perspective if you're in those states, obviously.
And then where are you on hemp loophole? I assume you also saw Rand Paul was on the Rogan show.
Yeah, I think I know they're trying to push out that extension till, is it 2028? I think push it out in some way. Yeah, I think the thing about it, as far as I can see, is at least it's I don't know, still looking to shake out, I think, the worst parts of the intoxicating THC loophole ultimately. I think not trying to say we should restore it and have it and this is the only way to access it.
But it sounds like the effectiveness for the change, right, is the end of this year, which would certainly impact those businesses well before the end of this year. Mm-hmm. They're looking to push that out, I guess, a year or two or something like that, right?
I think 2 years, yeah.
Okay. Do you think it happens?
I don't know if it happens. I almost want to say I don't hope it happens, because I hope that puts pressure to have a proper framework with cannabis as one plant, one rule, all that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I think from what we've seen in terms of the industry the cannabis industry putting pressure on the administration, that being heard, that resulting in an executive order, I hope that is the cleared path through, and it seems like we have data points that is opening up. So I don't know. I'm going to say no. I hope it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think it does either. And I think for points that other people have made, I just can't see this high on a list of, politicians' things that they're going to really focus in on, right? Also, I think relative to Rand Paul's attempt to get it out of the continuing spending bill or whatever that was called, not a lot of support there either. And I think, I didn't see the whole segment, so I need to go back and watch it. So I only saw clips of it, but a little disingenuous on Rand's part in terms of describing, the environment, in terms of saying that there were some issues and that those issues needed to be tended to. And, this is an extreme way of doing it. And I'm like, Chinese cartels, buddy, like it wasn't just a few problems here and there. To me, a few problems here and there are 25, 50, 100 milligram, drinks available too easily to kids, right? Without enough, ID checking and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to imagine actually adults want that much in a can as well, but whatever. Everyone's different and can do whatever they want as grown adults. So, I just felt like he really minimized the problems that they had. And now when they run into what they've run into, saying, just kidding, we're going to fix it. And I don't know that I've still seen what the fix is. All I've seen them fight for is an extension, and not fighting for, real regulation and quality and testing and adult verification and all of those things. So I don't see how they get it without that, right? I mean, I'd love to live in a world where they said, yes, all cannabis is good, right? And I think we'll get there. But to have approved it in this way, to see what, what seemingly were a lot of bad actors, just driving really bad stuff through that loophole, seeing an industry that wouldn't regulate itself, seeing an industry that, quite frankly, seemingly embraced some of the bad actors as part of their organizations and membership and whatever, not held their own members accountable. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, the path to get anything stronger on the hemp side won't be about getting this extension, but it'll be coming to politicians and saying, hey, we need to regulate these products. And, we need to have whatever it is, an agency or a division or something that ensures there's some checks and balances, because, the industry seemingly couldn't police itself.
Yeah, I think ultimately the answer is not extension, and then I guess extension following the extension and extension following the extension, like you're saying. I think it is
And I'm definitely like one plant, one rule, simple.
Yeah, I think it makes sense not to stay in sort of a system, regulatory framework, all of that didn't work. And I think it is time to kind of turn to the future and say, like you're saying, how do we all come together on safe products?
Speaking of that, you need to have Trent on again. I'm curious how the whole lawsuit thing, if, did that go away? Are they still pushing on it? He probably may not be able to say too much, for an active whatever issue. But actually, I thought that was an interesting angle in terms of how the cannabis industry was trying to close, not the loophole, but close products that weren't even compliant to the flexibility that was provided under the Farm Bill Act. So I thought that was an interesting strategy and approach. So I don't know. We'll see.
We'll have to follow up with him anyway. I think, he does a great job kind of breaking down, obviously, where Jushi is seeing progress and an opportunity. But I think speaking especially to the different footprints, especially in Virginia, I think he was, very on top of the election, where things were going and headed in terms of how, hemp ultimately was treated and kind of where things might be going from here. So I definitely reach out again. See him on. Chat through it with him. But
is there new stuff to talk about psychedelics? I think you guys covered that pretty well yesterday. I think for me, I still look at that and just, I think we even talked about it on one of the shows. It's that meme of the boyfriend and girlfriend walking, but the boyfriend's looking back or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's, the boyfriend and girlfriend are the cannabis investors, even though we had a pretty good year last year. Yes. But psychedelics had a better one. Yes. Looking back at, psychedelics, thinking, what the heck, right? And I think in some ways, I haven't looked at year-to-date performance in the baskets. In terms of how they're doing, it's too short of a time frame really to assess. But holy cow, for a space that's really turned around over the last year plus, boy, it's been hard to drive some interest. We've seen some trickle in here and there, but really, really hard to find more people wanting to invest in the space.
I think that has been true. I do wonder if we've talked all the time, I think, about psychedelics hitting kind of its next chapter, its next kind of level ultimately in terms of where it is as a, company's business industry, but also from an investment perspective. I do wonder if like the rebrands we're seeing from a lot of these companies that do seem to be kind of reorienting themselves for kind of a new investor base and kind of really trying to refresh on what they do, the opportunities, and moving their IP through review. I do wonder if we're at a point where that sort of changes, because I think it has been hard. It's been, I think, for when you hear psychedelics, it feels very out there, kind of fringe, but it really isn't. And I think
they really need products approved, right? I mean, it's such a capital intensive business with trials and tests and everything else they're investing into getting these products, built and tested and making sure they're ready for consumption. It's time to get a few of these things out there, get some revenue flowing. And at least as an investor, you don't feel like, I'm looking at another reverse split or someone's merging with someone or, any of those things. You can see we've seen nice stock appreciation, but start to see some really nice growth in the space as well.
True. Well, I think that has changed in a meaningful way. We've talked about it a ton, but I think just the FDA fast tracking does allow you to really compress the timeline to get something to market meaningfully. So again, hopefully we see that. I think a lot of these companies in mid to late 2025 have put in their applications, have been granted. And so hopefully we see some of those results kind of come through in 2026. We'll have to see. But I think we're continually talking with people, and it does resonate with people in terms of, I think, the issues that a lot of these drugs are designed to treat and have been able to show real efficacy ultimately. I think it's something that people will keep an eye on. Again, if you're in cannabis and you are no stranger to volatility, might be something worth taking a look at as well. But very, very volatile. Of course, they live and die by IP. But some interesting stuff getting developed out there.
Yep. And I see I was laughing as you were reading his name or his name, W.E.B. Doobie. On here, which I don't love anonymous accounts, but I saw him respond to one of my posts yesterday about a portfolio manager consuming a little cannabis. And I meant to respond to him and say, I'm not the portfolio manager. Dan won't let me touch the portfolio. Neither will you.
True. But you can touch the products underneath, I guess, which is good.
It was the same one I think I was talking about with Aaron Miles. It was the banana muffin. It's fantastic. That device too. It's such an easy draw, and it's vapor, right? So it's not smoke, and I was outside or whatever, and it's good. It's a nice end of my evening
ritual routine way to blow off steam.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, real quick. Let me see. I'm getting some questions. Speaking of WEB, some questions on cannabis. Let me see if I can pull these up. I'll read this out loud. So, does the Medicare pilot program set a vague timeline? Meaning, if the government were to move forward with the program in April, wouldn't that mean the Schedule 3 order would need to be signed by January through February timeframe?
I've seen that discussed, and yes, just because Trump put a date in an executive order doesn't make it real. It makes it a target. So I guess I'd keep that in mind. But yeah, to hit that target and to use Trump's phrase of getting cannabis done expeditiously, was that his word? If you get that done expeditiously and you set a mid-year target to implement this in part of Medicare, probably realistic. It's an executive order, so as much as I wished it was written in stone, it's not. But yeah, I'm thinking the same way, and I'm hearing that, right? Again, nothing secret or whatever, but I'm hearing, okay, we're in the 1, 2, 3 week time frame, but we also might not be in the 1, 2 or 3 week time frame. So be careful investing in these things. Diversify your bonds, as the Wu-Tang Financial would say.
Yeah, fair enough. Your bond. Yeah, that's true. Okay, another question, which I wanted to make sure we have in there as well, which is one signed. How long does the market take to re-rate the sector, or is that happening now? Is it priced in? That's always the question.
Well, going back to my point about how much that basket has moved, in a very short time frame, seemingly on this news, I think there has been, yes, a bit of repricing, because again, nothing has changed. And I say nothing has changed, right? Dealing with the farm bill stuff, that's meaningful. And I think you'll see some impact over time relative to, the cannabis industry's numbers. But nothing has changed. And so, yes, it would tell me that, you're starting to see early movement in that, but I'll still stand by, what I've said earlier, which is, getting it signed, huge. I believe prices will go up. These are still microcap stocks. So if not enough people are coming in for anyone who wants to try to sell against it, it'll be a battle, and it doesn't take a lot of capital to push it around. Whatever guidance we can hopefully get around it for custody and listing won't happen overnight. Banks, compliance department, legal department, risk department, they're all going to put their fingers in things, right? They get paid lots of money to analyze these and write procedures. We do know from having conversations with our service providers, they're all looking at it. They're all in tune with it. But they are all saying, show me what it looks like, and I'll tell you what we can do, right? And I'm like, I can't show you what it looks like yet. So, we all sort of know the same thing, and they're well aware, but it'll take them some time. And then I would still say, all right, you want access to JP Morgan Chase's broker dealer network and Merrill Lynch's, Bank of America broker dealer network and UBS and Morgan Stanley, right? There is a ton of money on those platforms, right? Just look at how much they own of iShares and State Street's ETFs and other things, right? You can just look at the size of those companies. In bigger institutions, right? The ones that will be slow to move to the space. Smaller ones will come in quickly, but I think it's going to take some time to get there. I do think we have started to see that pricing adjust accordingly. And fingers crossed we get more positive news, but also, remember, we might not.
Always risk. That's true. It's good to have
not easy.
No, that is true. But great questions, and thanks for asking them. Do appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Always. Also, Skip's got an interesting point. Skip's got an interesting point talking about psychedelics not to whip back. But NRX,
nice.
Pharmaceuticals able some more real world evidence, or whatever that term is. The FDA recorded. Yeah, I think interesting to see the spread of different substances that people are working with. I think the ketamine thing, might have an interesting fast track, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think a lot of great themes to keep an eye on, of course. It's going to be an interesting year. We'll see. I'm going to say, I think when Ron Piccinini was on last time, I think he was saying, I think we were doing it ahead of 2026, but he was kind of looking at the landscape and was saying, buckle in, I think ultimately is his view on, which is interesting.
Especially, I think the biggest, two big areas I think we're looking at. One is rates and all the craziness that's going on with Fed and the administration. Tariffs in the decision of the Supreme Court. Those are probably the two big things I'm looking at, regardless of this drama with the Fed and Powell. Ultimately, I think he's leaving, and they're going to put someone in they can control, and rates are going down. So I think that'll be good for the market. The tariffs thing, boy, that can really have a big ripple effect. And then look for the administration to scramble, which is why I would desperately love, Pam Bondi to sign this thing before we have to deal with whatever drama comes out as a result of that.
Yes.
But this administration and the Attorney General's office and all the legal counsel are spread thin.
Yes, that is true. I think definitely their willingness to move fast and break things, I think, works well in the world of cannabis. But if it's doing other things that kind of create more, not chaos, but more things that they need to worry about if we're looking at
uncertainty, volatility,
all that stuff. It's interesting landscape, but we'll talk more about it as we go along. But good kind of check in, I think, on where we are. I know we're close on time. Anything we missed in terms of chatting through stuff? I feel like those.
What does the rest of the week look like? So Clear Street on Friday or Thursday?
So we've got Greg Pendy from Clear Street on Friday. So he was originally scheduled for today, but there's some interesting. We'll talk about it on Friday with him, which would be great. And then tomorrow we've got Eddie Elfenbein, so that should be good. Nice. He's been having a good start to the year.
He's starting off strong, yeah.
So some interesting names. We'll definitely be kind of checking in on how his rebalance has gone, and I think so far it looks like things are kicking off on a good foot. So we'll spend some time there and kind of getting his also kind of view on the market as well. His ultimately market view. All right. With all that said, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being on. Thanks so much. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.